A colony sat on the quiet edge of known space, so far from the busy trade routes that most people only heard about it in old maps or long-distance reports. Life there was usually calm. The researchers liked the silence, the engineers liked the predictability, and the few families who lived there enjoyed the slow rhythm of days that all looked almost the same. Nothing dramatic happened on a place like this. That was the whole point of building it out here. But on this particular cycle, things shifted so suddenly that even the most experienced workers didn't know how to react. It started with a tremor, soft enough that someone could mistake it for a machine humming too loudly, yet strange enough that everyone paused. Floors vibrated gently, lights flickered, and a faint, low sound rolled through the entire settlement. No one panicked at first. Most people thought it was a simple power adjustment or a routine system test. But within minutes, the tremor grew into something heavier, and the entire structure gave a long, uneasy groan. People rushed out into the main corridor. The hall filled with voices, some asking questions, others trying to calm their neighbors. A few seconds later, the emergency lights switched on, glowing a dim orange across the walls. That sign alone was enough to make their hearts drop. Orange meant something had gone wrong. Not a disaster, but not small either. In the central control room, technicians stared at screens filled with static. Their long-range communication system, the most important line connecting them to the rest of human space, was down. Not just weak, completely gone. The panels showed no signal, no connection, no trace of the distant network. It was like someone had wiped the entire channel clean. The colony supervisor tried everything manual reset, backup relays, alternate frequency bands, but nothing worked. Every attempt ended in failure. When he finally stepped back from the console, the room went quiet in a heavy way, like everyone already knew what this meant, but didn't want to admit it. Word spread fast. On a small colony, news always moved quicker than official reports. One person whispered to another, and within 10 minutes, everyone from the science labs to the greenhouse knew they were cut off. Some people tried to stay positive. They said maybe it was a temporary glitch or a solar burst interfering with signals. But deep down, many felt the same sinking fear. Being disconnected at this distance was dangerous. Resupply ships came only every few months. Messages to and from the central systems were their lifeline. Without a signal, they had no way to ask for help, no way to report a problem, and no way to know if something bigger was happening outside their small world. As if the communication loss wasn't enough. The systems that controlled temperature and air stability began acting strangely too. Nothing fatal, but definitely unstable. Fans slowed down for a few seconds before jumping back to full speed, causing sudden pressure changes that made people's ears ring. Heating units hesitated before correcting themselves. Lights dimmed at random times, leaving hallways in odd shadows. Maintenance crews rushed from one location to another, tools in hand, trying to patch small issues before they grew worse. They worked with focus, but even they couldn't hide the worry in their eyes. Every piece of equipment was old. The colony had been waiting for an upgrade shipment for months. Without communication, that shipment might never even launch. The alien residents of the settlement members of a quiet, peaceful species that had joined the research project years earlier noticed the fear spreading among the humans. They were calm by nature, but even they seemed uneasy. They gathered in small groups, watching the humans work, offering help where they could, but also whispering among themselves in low, musical voices. They had lived long enough in the galaxy to understand what isolation could mean. By the second day, the situation had grown worse. With long-range communication still down, people started to realize this wasn't a minor fault. If the issue was local, they would have fixed it by now. If it was external, then they were at the mercy of something they couldn't even identify. A sense of being forgotten began creeping into everyone's thoughts. Some tried to push away the idea, saying that the main human systems always kept track of every colony. They insisted that someone would notice the silence and send help. But others knew the truth. At this distance, silence wasn't unusual. They were too far out. It could take weeks before anyone realized something was off. In the cafeteria, conversations grew quieter. People sat together not because they were hungry, but because they didn't want to be alone. Whenever a machine sputtered or a light flickered, heads turned at the same time, as if everyone feared the next system failure would be the one they couldn't repair. An engineer who had been working nonstop since the incident rubbed tired circles under his eyes as he spoke softly to a friend at one of the tables. He explained that the main power grid was stable for now, but some of the backup units were overheating. If any of them failed, it would put even more strain on the others. The friend listened quietly, their face tight with worry. Outside the dome, the sky looked painfully calm. The stars seemed frozen, almost cold in the way they watched the helpless colony beneath them. Even the alien residents mentioned that the night felt heavier than usual, like the silence of space was pressing down on the settlement. The colony supervisor finally gathered everyone in the meeting hall. People filled the room, some standing along the walls, others sitting on the floor. Every face carried the same expression: anxious, tired, hoping for news that would make things better. He spoke gently, trying not to let his own stress show. He explained the situation clearly. Communications were down, repairs were slow, and certain systems needed constant monitoring. But he also said they were still safe for the moment. Everyone just had to remain calm and patient. He told them they were doing everything possible. He promised that they would get through this together. But even as he spoke those encouraging words, a few people noticed the slight tremble in his voice, the way he kept glancing toward the malfunctioning status panels behind him. After the meeting, the crowd left with mixed emotions. Some felt a bit reassured. Others felt even more worried because they could see the truth behind the supervisor's attempt to stay strong. They didn't blame him. They knew he cared deeply about the colony. But no speech could erase the fear of being completely alone in an unpredictable universe. By the third day, exhaustion became a normal feeling. People slept less, worked more, and tried to keep themselves busy to avoid thinking about what might happen if help didn't come. The younger members of the colony looked to the adults for comfort. But even the adults struggled to offer any. The alien residents helped calm the atmosphere by organizing small gatherings with their soft music and peaceful movements. Their presence reminded everyone that they weren't alone in facing this. They truly were a community, human and alien working side by side. Still, even that comfort couldn't erase the growing sense of time slipping away. Supplies weren't dangerously low yet, but they weren't plentiful either. The greenhouse workers counted their resources repeatedly. Water was stable, but filtration systems needed maintenance soon. Food stores would last several weeks, maybe more if rationing started. The problem wasn't the present, it was the uncertainty of the future. And as night fell again, people looked up through the dome at the endless stars and wondered whether anyone out there knew they were in trouble, whether anyone was on the way, whether anyone even remembered that this tiny colony existed. For the first time since its creation, the settlement didn't feel like a peaceful outpost. It felt like a small, fragile dot in the middle of a huge, silent void. And every person, human or alien, carried the same quiet fear in their heart. What if no help was coming? What if they truly were alone? What if the universe had simply passed them by without noticing? No one said these thoughts out loud. They didn't need to. The silence, the flickering lights, the unstable systems, everything around them said it for them. And that silent fear settled over the colony like a shadow, waiting for whatever would come next. The next few days felt longer than the colony had ever experienced. Time didn't move smoothly anymore. Every hour felt stretched, like the clocks were slowing down just to make the waiting worse. People tried to keep their daily routines, but nothing felt normal. Every action, every sound, every small disturbance reminded them that their connection to the rest of the galaxy was still gone down in the engineering bay. Tired faces gathered around a console filled with warning lights. A group of engineers stood shoulder to shoulder, talking in low, serious voices. They had run diagnostics again and again, but no matter what they tried, the communication network stayed silent. One engineer gently tapped a worn-out panel, as if hoping something inside would suddenly wake up. At DIDN single quotes T. Someone suggested that maybe the CUM system had suffered internal burnout from the cosmic tremor earlier. But even if that was true, they didn't have the right parts to replace everything. Their supplies were limited. The colony had always depended on scheduled shipments for major repairs. Now, without a way to send a message, they couldn't even request the missing components. The colony supervisor walked into the bay and looked around at the worried faces. His steps were slow, as if he carried the weight of everyone's fear on his shoulders. He didn't need to ask if there was any progress. The looks on their faces told him everything. Still, he tried to stay calm. "Let's focus on stabilizing the systems we can," he said. "If we keep the colony functioning, we buy more time." They nodded, grateful that someone was still guiding them, even if the answers were limited. Across the settlement, people tried to distract themselves. A cafeteria remained open around the clock, not because anyone was hungry all the time, but because people didn't want to be alone. Groups sat together at tables, sipping warm drinks and speaking quietly. They shared small stories, memories of better days, and simple jokes just to keep spirits from sinking too low. Sometimes the silence in the cafeteria was louder than the conversations. When a machine hissed or a pipe rattled, all heads turned instinctively. People didn't even realize they were holding their breath until the sound faded and everything continued working as usual. In the greenhouse, the workers tended to the crops with extra care. Plants didn't know anything about communication failures or isolated colonies. They kept growing as long as they received light, water, and attention. Watching them grow brought a sense of comfort to the workers. It reminded them that life kept going, even when things seemed uncertain. One worker gently touched the leaves of a small vegetable plant and whispered to it the way people talk to pets or young children. The plant didn't respond, but caring for it helped calm her. Another worker checked the water filtration system and frowned when he saw small fluctuations in the readings. It still worked, but it was clearly struggling. "We'll make it last," he said, mostly to himself. Outside, the alien residents gathered beneath the faint light of their glowing lanterns. They had brought these lanterns from their homeworld, and the soft blue light they emitted had always fascinated the humans. On nights like this, the lanterns looked even more comforting. They circled around them and hummed gentle melodies that echoed softly in the open air. Some humans watched from nearby benches. The melodies eased the tension in their chests. Even though they didn't understand the words or the meaning of the songs, the feeling behind them was warm and steady. It reminded everyone that they weren't facing the situation alone. The two species had built this colony together, shared meals, traded knowledge, and helped one another during small problems. This crisis was no different. They would face it side by side. But no matter how comforting the moments were, reality always returned. On the fourth day, the temperature systems faltered again. A sudden drop in warmth made people shiver as they stepped through the corridors. The maintenance team rushed to the main control room, tools in hand, and managed to stabilize the system before things grew too cold. Everyone cheered a bit when normal temperatures returned, but the celebration was short. The system showed clear signs of wearing out. The supervisor called for a meeting again. People gathered in the hall, filling every seat and standing along the walls. The atmosphere was tense, but people tried to look hopeful. The supervisor stood at the front, adjusting the small communication device clipped to his collar, a habit he couldn't stop, even though it wasn't connected to anything anymore. He explained that some systems were being pushed beyond their limits. The colony could still function, but only if they conserved energy and resources. He asked everyone to limit their usage of unnecessary devices, keep lights turned off in unused rooms, and be mindful of water consumption. No one argued. They all understood the seriousness of the situation. He also reminded them that fear was natural, but panic wouldn't help anyone. He encouraged the residents to stick together, help each other, and stay alert for updates. His words were steady and warm, the kind that made people feel just a little stronger. But when the meeting ended and people walked out, some of them whispered to one another, "What if no one knows we're offline? What if the next ship won't come for months? What if we have less time than we think?" No one had answers. Later that evening, a technician sat alone in the dim observation room. The large curved window showed the endless dark of space. Stars looked like tiny cold sparks scattered across a black ocean. He stared at them silently, wondering if someone out there might be trying to reach the colony but couldn't get through. He placed his hand on the glass, as if trying to touch the distant lights. He imagined a ship traveling across that vast darkness, heading their way. But the image faded quickly. There was no guarantee that anyone knew they were in trouble. A small group of children played quietly nearby, drawing shapes on portable screens. They seemed unaware of the gravity of the situation, but even they sensed the shift in the adults' energy. Their voices were softer than usual, their games calmer. One child looked up at the technician and asked, "When will the next ship come?" He paused. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to scare them. So he answered gently, "It will come when it can. Ships always find their way eventually." The child nodded and went back to drawing, accepting the answer with innocent trust. As the night went on, the wind outside the dome picked up, creating a soft but eerie howl that traveled across the settlement. It wasn't dangerous, but it added a layer of unease. People tried to sleep, though many woke up multiple times, listening for sounds of failing machines or sudden alarms. Sleep didn't bring rest. It only brought more time to think. By the next morning, conversations around the colony shifted from fear to quiet acceptance. People weren't giving up, but they had learned to carry the uncertainty as part of their routine. Everyone had a job to do, repairing systems, tending plants, checking air circulation, assisting with research, comforting neighbors. The more they stayed busy, the less they had to dwell on the silence from the stars. Still, as the days passed, one truth settled heavily into every heart. Hope was fading, not all at once, but slowly, like a candle burning down until the flame barely held on. Every day with no signal made the silence feel deeper. Every flicker of the lights reminded them that the colony was living on fragile systems. Every shift in temperature made them think about the limits of their equipment. But what hit the hardest was the thought that maybe humanity didn't know. Maybe no one had noticed the colony's sudden silence. Maybe, out of all the countless systems being monitored across the galaxy, their tiny research outpost had slipped through the cracks. The alien residents sensed this shift as well. They had a gift for reading emotions, and they could feel the heaviness building among the humans. So they offered more help repairing equipment, sharing their calm presence, guiding meditation exercises, and keeping night watch to give exhausted humans extra rest. Their kindness reminded the colony that they weren't forgotten by everyone. They had each other, even if the rest of the galaxy remained silent. In the middle of all this, the supervisor stood alone in his office, looking over old reports and system logs. His eyes were tired, but he kept searching for any sign of progress. Even a small breakthrough would give the colony something to hold on to. But the logs showed the same result over and over: no signal, no connection, no response. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, letting out a long breath. He wasn't allowed to show fear in front of the colony, but in that private moment, he let himself feel it. The weight of responsibility, the fear of failure, the worry that he might not be able to protect the people relying on him. But he didn't give up. He couldn't. He stood up again, rubbed his face, and returned to the control room to help the technicians. They weren't giving up, and neither would he. The colony moved through these days with quiet strength. Not because they believed everything would be fine, but because they refused to stop trying. Even when hope dimmed, determination kept them moving, and somewhere deep inside, in a place no one wanted to admit out loud, there was a tiny spark of belief, a fragile wish that help might arrive from somewhere. They couldn't predict. They didn't know it yet. But the universe had already begun shifting in their favor. That something was out there, that something massive, something moving faster than they could imagine. But for now, the colony could only wait in silence, holding on to the last threads of hope as the dark sky stretched endlessly above them. The sixth day began quietly, almost too quietly. People moved slowly around the colony, their steps soft, their minds tired from constant worry. Even the machines seemed to hum more softly, as if they too sensed the heaviness that had settled over everyone. No one expected anything to change. They had grown used to the silence from the stars. But that morning, something different happened, small at first, but enough to make a few heads turn. A faint tremor rippled across the ground. Nothing strong, nothing dangerous, just a tiny vibration that made mugs shake on tables and tools shift on workbenches. Most residents didn't pay attention. Tremors had become a normal part of life ever since the cosmic disturbance days earlier. But in the small, round sensor room, where screens lined every wall, a young technician noticed something unusual. He had barely slept in the past 2 days, and his eyes were heavy. But even through that fatigue, he saw a strange movement on the main display. A single line of data thin, flickering and unstable, appeared on the edge of the screen. At first, he thought it was a glitch caused by the same interference that had broken their communication network. He leaned closer, adjusting the sensitivity levels. The line moved again, slightly stronger than before. He frowned, rubbing his eyes to make sure he wasn't imagining it. The line wasn't behaving like interference. It wasn't random. It had rhythm, a pattern, a pulse. His heartbeat sped up. He called 2 other technicians over. They leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the faint reading. One of them checked the power levels. Another checked the backup sensors. The reading remained faint, distant, but very real. For a moment, the 3 of them didn't speak. They just stared at the screen in disbelief. Finally, one of them whispered, "That's not a natural signal." The technician took a deep breath and increased the magnification on the display. The faint reading expanded into a wider shape, a blurry, shifting mass of data points. It didn't match any of their usual readings from passing asteroids, drifting debris, or local anomalies. The shape was moving, steadily, purposefully. Another tremor passed beneath the colony, stronger than the first. This time, it made a few ceiling panels rattle. What if it's another cosmic disturbance? Someone said dot, but the technician shook his head. Natural anomalies don't have a trajectory like this. This thing is coming in fast. More technicians gathered, drawn by the murmurs spreading through the room. Soon the space was filled with people watching the unclear image on the screen, holding their breath. The technician's hands shook slightly as he pushed the range farther. The system strained, clearly not built to detect something at such distance after the communication failure. But the image sharpened just enough to show more structure. "It's big," someone whispered. Whatever it is, it's huge. The word huge spread across the colony like wildfire. Engineers whispered it in passing. Greenhouse workers repeated it to each other in confusion. Even the alien residents sensed the shift in the air. They watched silently as humans hurried through the corridors. Their steps quicker, their expressions sharper. Within minutes, the supervisor arrived in the sensor room, breathing heavily as he pushed through the growing crowd. What's going on? He asked. The technician pointed to the screen. We're picking up something. Something moving toward us. It's still far, but the size readings... He didn't finish because the image suddenly glitched, then reappeared in a clearer form. It still wasn't perfect, but it was enough. A shape long, metallic, and unmistakably structured, was coming into sensor range. The supervisor leaned closer, eyes wide. His voice dropped to a whisper. That looks like a vessel. The room fell absolutely silent. A vessel meant life. A vessel meant someone was out there. A vessel meant hope, but it also raised new questions. What kind of vessel? Who did it belong to? Was it responding to their distress, even though they had never been able to send one? Some of the alien residents stepped in, their calm voices mixing with the anxious human whispers. They, too, recognized the unmistakable signs of something artificial, something controlled. The technician swallowed hard and ran another scan. The new results made everyone in the room freeze. The vessel wasn't drifting. It was accelerating, coming directly toward the colony. That alone was shocking. But then the system registered something even stranger. The vessel was traveling faster than any standard ship could at that distance. It wasn't just moving with speed, it was moving with intention. Like something or someone had pushed every system to the limit. The tremor that passed. Under the colony, this time was strong enough to make a few technicians reach out to steady themselves. Against the consoles, one of them said quietly, "Is that human technology?" The supervisor didn't answer. He stared at the growing outline on the screen, his chest rising and falling slowly as if afraid to breathe wrong and break the moment. The colony had been lost in silence for almost a week. And now this, the word rescue hovered unspoken in the air, dangerous and fragile. No one wanted to say it out loud. Not yet. The technician activated the last functional long-range scanner, a small device that had survived the disturbance by sheer luck. It crackled with static before projecting a slightly clearer image. The shape on the display took form. Sharp edges. A massive hull. Heat signatures burning bright at the rear. A configuration of engines that could only belong to advanced human design. Every person watching leaned forward instinctively, their eyes widening as the outline grew more detailed. One of the alien residents folded their hands and softly said, "It is not a natural force. That is a crafted machine. A crafted machine rushing through the void. Crafted machine heading straight for them. A crafted machine large enough to shake their sensors at extreme distance." The technician whispered, It's a warship." Gasps filled the room. A human warship, not a supply vessel, not a research vessel, not an exploration cruiser. Warship. The kind of ship that only left dock for serious missions. High-risk operations or urgent responses. The kind of ship equipped with technology that could jump across vast distances faster than anything else humanity possessed. No one expected something like that. The supervisor stepped back slowly, his mind racing. Why would a warship be coming here? This colony wasn't a strategic point. It wasn't in danger from outside forces. It was just a peaceful research outpost. Unless the warship had detected something before the communication network failed. Unless someone had seen the blackout from afar. Unless someone, somewhere in the vastness of human space, had noticed the sudden silence of this little colony and chosen not to ignore it. The sensor room filled with rising excitement. Fear, disbelief, and hope all tangled together. No one could look away from the screen. Every second, the readings grew stronger. The vessel moved closer, approaching from outside normal travel lanes. It wasn't following expected flight paths. It wasn't slowing down. It was pushing through space with something close to urgency. One of the junior technicians whispered, "It's almost like they're rushing." The supervisor's voice was low. "Maybe they are." Even the walls seemed to vibrate with anticipation. It felt as if the colony had been holding its breath for days and was now gasping for air all at once. People throughout the settlement gathered near screens, windows, and open observation points. Some stood alone. Others clumped in groups, gripping each other's arms, whispering prayers or quiet wishes. In the cafeteria, someone dropped a mug and didn't even pause to pick it up. They simply stared at the display on the wall. Stunned, children pressed their hands against the dome glass, looking up at the star-filled sky. Unaware of how big this moment truly was, the alien residents stood in a solemn circle, their glowing lanterns dimming as they focused on the energy they felt approaching from afar. Even they, calm as they usually were, showed signs of trembling excitement. Hours passed, but no one left their stations. Everyone watched the readings grow stronger, clearer. More defined. The technician adjusted the feed again, and the room gasped. For the first time. The vessel's full silhouette appeared on the screen, huge, powerful, with the unmistakable structure of a human built warship designed for long-range missions. Its engines burned like stars. Its hull reflected faint light from distant suns, and the signature it gave off was unmistakable. Human signal. Pure and clear. The technician's eyes filled with tears. He didn't even notice as he whispered, "It's them. It's really them." The colony supervisor closed his eyes for a moment, a wave of emotion washing over him. When he opened them again, they were bright with determination. No one spoke loudly. No one cheered. The moment was too raw, too sacred, too unreal. But the same thought lit up inside every heart. They weren't alone. Someone was. Coming. Someone fast, someone powerful, someone human, and they were racing through the void, straight toward the forgotten little colony that had thought no help would ever come. The strange vessel drew closer with every passing minute, and the entire colony seemed to pulse with nervous energy. Nobody had to announce updates anymore. People simply felt the approaching presence, like a distant heartbeat growing louder across the sky. The technicians kept the sensor screens on full display, projecting the ship's outline across every common area. Even those who tried to stay calm found themselves glancing at the screens again and again, hardly believing what they were seeing. By noon, the readings were strong enough that even older equipment, once written off as unreliable, began picking up the incoming signal. What had started as a faint blur had now become a clear silhouette of a massive human warship cutting through space with precision. The alien residents, who usually moved with quiet grace, now watched the sky with intense curiosity. Their expressions were calm, yet even they couldn't hide their amazement. They whispered among themselves, commenting on the sheer size and energy of the vessel. To them, human engineering had always seemed unpredictable, sometimes messy, sometimes brilliant, but always filled with surprising power. This ship felt like the perfect example of that. Inside the colony, people drifted toward windows, observation decks, and open corridors that faced the sky. The air felt different, charged with something electric. Even the children sensed the shift and clung to adults' hands, pointing at the faint glow beginning to appear far above the dome. Low hum spread through the colony, a sound of the sky reacting to what was entering the system. It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't even loud. It was like the atmosphere trembled in recognition of the ship's sudden arrival. As the glow became brighter, the colony's supervisors and technicians braced. Themselves, space rippled. The air outside the dome shimmered like heat rising from desert sand. Then, with a sudden flare of white-blue light, a controlled rift opened. It wasn't chaotic or explosive. It was precise, like someone slicing the fabric of space with careful hands. A collective gasp rose from the colony. The warship burst through the rift. It didn't appear slowly or quietly. It arrived with a force that was impossible to ignore. The hull glowed faintly from the heat of the jump, long trails of energy following its path like streaks of fire. Its engines flared, stabilizing the ship as it entered normal space. The colony's ground shook lightly, not in fear, but in awe. The ship was enormously larger than anything the residents had ever seen up close. Sleek metal plating covered its sides, catching the distant sunlight and reflecting it like a blade. Rows of lights blinked along its structure, sending signals that formed patterns the technicians knew. Well, .human-made, .human-controlled, .human-owned. There was no doubt now. Whispers spread through the crowd gathered at the dome windows. It really is ours. People stared in stunned silence, unable to decide whether to scream in joy or stand frozen in disbelief. For days they had lived in fear, convinced the galaxy had forgotten them. And now, towering above them, was a symbol of human strength, arriving not quietly, but in a way that shook the stars themselves. The warship slowed, adjusting its position with controlled movements. Each shift created soft vibrations across the colony's sensors. It hovered in the sky like a metallic guardian, steady and unshakable. The alien residents bowed their heads slightly. Even they could feel the raw confidence radiating from the ship, a confidence that came from knowing exactly who they were and what they had come to do. As the ship settled into a stable hold above the colony, the supervisor stepped forward to the communication room. The equipment around him flickered uncertainly. It had not been fully functional since the blackout. But before he could even attempt to connect the signal, a soft chime filled the air. Every working screen across the colony lit up. A calm, steady voice echoed through every corner of the settlement. This is the human vessel, Solace Dawn. We have detected your communication blackout and your atmospheric irregularities. We are here to assist immediately. Stand by for support personnel and supplies. For a moment, no one moved. Then the entire colony broke into breathless relief. Some people covered their mouths, tears welling in their eyes. Others hugged the nearest person, whether human or alien. A few simply sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the sudden release of tension they had carried for too long. The message repeated once, then faded. Outside, the massive warship began to open its lower hangar doors. Bright white lights spilled out, illuminating the sky. Small shuttles detached one after another, lining up in careful formation before descending toward the colony. Children pressed their faces to the dome glass, pointing and cheering. Adults watched with wide, grateful eyes. The alien residents tilted their heads, studying the shuttles with fascination. The first shuttle touched down on the landing pad, outside the colony's main entrance. Dust rose softly around it, and the engines hummed as they powered down. A few seconds later, the side doors slid open, revealing human crew members in sleek, clean uniforms. They stepped onto the ground with calm steps, carrying cases filled with supplies, tools, and diagnostic equipment. Their movements were confident yet gentle, as if they already understood how fragile the colony's morale had become. The supervisor ran forward to greet them. He didn't run out of fear or urgency. He ran because he could finally breathe. One of the crew members offered a respectful nod. We came as soon as we detected the blackout. Your last transmission reached us seconds before the network collapsed. The supervisor looked stunned. Our last transmission? We didn't know anything went through. It did, the crew member replied. A short pulse. Enough for us to track. Relief washed over the supervisor so deeply that he needed a moment to steady himself. Behind him, more residents arrived, eager to see the rescuers. The alien residents also approached, offering polite gestures of welcome. The warship crew wasted no time. They moved with careful coordination, distributing medical kits, portable power units, emergency food packs, and repair drones. Everything they brought was designed for rapid support. Inside the colony, people made way for them, guiding them through hallways, showing them broken systems and unstable equipment. The crew responded with reassuring nods and quick assessments. Shuttles continued landing outside, each bringing more supplies, engineers, medics, and technicians. Drones scurried across the ground like small helpers, scanning walls and pipes and central systems. Everywhere they went, lights steadied, fans hummed normally, and readings shifted back into safe zones. The greenhouse workers cried quietly when they saw portable nutrient packs being unloaded. The water filtration team almost hugged the human technicians when they arrived with fresh filters and new stabilizers. The children laughed when a medic handed them warm survival blankets that felt incredibly soft to touch. Even the alien residents, who usually stayed composed, expressed gratitude in their own subtle ways, bringing the human rescuers small gifts from their living quarters, offering warm drinks, and guiding them through sections that needed urgent attention. Inside the control room, the crew from the warship worked on the communication system. They replaced burned-out circuits, soothed overheating panels, and installed a temporary module from their ship. The process was complicated, but within an hour, the first signal bars flickered to life on the display. The supervisor stared at the screen as the bars grew stronger. One by one, he whispered, "We're connected again." Outside, the warship hovered like a silent protector, its engines glowing softly in the fading daylight. People gathered near the dome windows again, watching it with awe. It felt like a miracle, like a promise made real. They had believed for days that no one was coming. They had feared the worst, imagining themselves forgotten in the endless stretch of space. But the arrival of the warship shattered those fears. Help had come, and it had come in the grandest, most stunning way possible, bursting through a rift in the sky, glowing with power, moving with purpose, and arriving with enough strength to lift the entire colony's spirit back to life. As night settled, the sky still glowed faintly from the ship's energy fields. The colony no longer felt dark or isolated. For the first time in days, people slept peacefully, not because all problems were solved, but because they finally knew deep in their hearts they mattered. Humanity had not abandoned them. Not ever. The next morning arrived with a sky that looked clearer than it had in days. Even the air smelled different, as if the colony itself had finally relaxed after holding its breath for too long. Most people woke up earlier than usual, pulled from sleep not by alarm clocks, but by the quiet excitement that filled the entire settlement. When they looked outside, the massive human warship still hovered above them, steady and silent like a guardian watching over the colony. Its presence alone felt like comfort. It reminded everyone that they were no longer alone, no longer drifting in the dark with no hope of help. They now had a link to the wider world again, and that changed the way people walked, talked, and even breathed. The early hours were busy. Human crew members from the warship had already begun inspecting the damage throughout the colony. They moved with steady hands and calm voices, explaining their plans to the residents so no one felt confused or left out. People followed them through corridors, asking questions, offering their own knowledge, and sometimes simply thanking them for being there. One of the engineers checked, the atmosphere stabilizers near the southern section of the dome. The machine had been struggling for days, making strange noises and sending out warning signals at random times. The technician crouched down, placed a small scanner against the side, and let out a low whistle when he saw the internal readings. This thing was minutes away from shutting down completely, he said, half amazed and half amused. Good thing you signaled when you did. The supervisor standing nearby gave a tired smile. We didn't even know our signal went through. It did, the technician replied. Barely, but it was enough. Residents who overheard the conversation exchanged glances. It felt unreal that a faint burst of data, something so small, had traveled across space and brought help straight to them. Work continued steadily. Shuttles moved back and forth between the colony and the warship, carrying crates filled with tools, medicine, food, and diagnostic units. The colony's own crew members guided the newcomers, showing them where things had broken first, where the damage was worst, and which parts of the settlement needed immediate attention. Children watched all of this from behind safe barricades, whispering to each other with wide eyes. To them, the rescuers looked almost like heroes from old stories, strong, calm, and carrying strange devices that glowed softly when activated. But the most important work that morning happened in the communication room. For the first time since the blackout, the room buzzed with full energy. Screens lit up with real-time signals. Panels blinked with fresh updates. For days, the colony had stared at dead monitors. Now everything looked alive again. The warship's communications specialist sat beside the colony's team, connecting wires, tightening ports, checking frequencies, and sending test signals. Every successful test brought small smiles. Every failure pushed them to try again. At one point, the specialist leaned back and said, "We're almost there. One more adjustment to the relay dish, and you'll have long-range communication restored." Those words spread through the room like warm sunlight. People straightened. Shoulders lifted. Breathing grew easier. Outside, 2 engineers climbed up to the top of the dome to adjust the relay dish. The wind tugged at their jackets as they moved. They worked carefully, tightening bolts and aligning the dish with the correct angle. When they finished, the specialist inside typed a command. The main screen flickered. Then, slowly, a green signal bar began to rise. 1 bar got 2 bars, 3 bars. The room fell silent. Then the 4th bar appeared, glowing solidly. The supervisor closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. For days, he had feared they would remain cut off forever. Now the screen showed clear, stable communication strong enough to connect to distant outposts and maybe even the capital station. Someone whispered, "We're connected again." The communications specialist leaned back with a satisfied grin. "Congratulations. You're fully online." People in the room actually clapped, a sound that felt strange after so many tense days. Some laughed out of relief. Others simply stood there, letting the moment wash over them. The supervisor looked at the specialist. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to us." The specialist waved a hand lightly. "We're here because you're family. Humans don't leave humans behind. Not out here." Those words struck everyone in the room. They weren't dramatic or loud, but they carried weight, the kind that stayed with people long after they were spoken. Meanwhile, in the central plaza, the alien residents prepared a small offering to welcome the human crew. It was their way of showing respect, a quiet gesture made from items gathered from their own living quarters. They arranged cups of warm herbal drink, clusters of fruit-like plants from their gardens, and small handmade tokens carved from stones that held cultural meaning to them. When the human crew arrived, the alien residents greeted them with a gentle bow of their heads. The human rescuers returned the gesture warmly, accepting the gifts with polite gratitude. That small exchange made the plaza feel peaceful, almost celebratory. Despite the ongoing repairs, one of the human medics checked the colony's infirmary. The lights flickered weakly, and the air smelled faintly of dust. She walked through the narrow hallway, examining each medical bay. Some equipment had burned out completely. Other machines still worked, but were dangerously unstable. She turned to the colony's medical worker and said softly, "We'll replace everything that's damaged. You won't have to worry about shortages anymore." The medical worker nodded with relief. Our supplies were running low. We were trying to ration what we had left. "You don't need to ration anymore," the medic assured him. "We brought enough to restock your entire wing." Outside, the warship hovered quietly, absorbing sunlight along its energy panels. From below, it looked like a mountain of metal suspended in the sky, strong enough to face any danger. Residents kept pausing in their work just to stare at it. Some whispered words of admiration. Others simply gazed silently, letting the ship's presence reassure them. By afternoon, the repairs across the colony began showing visible progress. Lights glowed softly in hallways that had been dark for days. Temperature control units hummed smoothly, bringing warmth back to cold sections. Water filters released steady streams again instead of sputtering. Unevenly, people walked with more confidence. Children ran through the corridors. Again, the fear that had once gripped the colony felt like a fading memory dot at one point. The supervisor stood outside the main entrance, watching the shuttles take off and land. The steady rhythm of engines felt almost comforting now. A human engineer walked up to him, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We've stabilized about 80% of your power grid," the engineer said. "The rest should be done by tonight." The supervisor nodded with deep gratitude. "You've done more than we could ever ask for." The engineer gave a small smile. "This colony matters. People live here. That's enough reason for us to help." Nearby, a group of human crew members sat with some residents, sharing stories about life aboard the warship. They talked about long journeys through outer regions, unexpected encounters in deep space, and the strange beauty of stars that looked different depending on which angle you approached them from. The residents listened with wide eyes, forgetting their earlier fear and stress. Evening settled slowly. The sky turned a soft gold, then deep blue, and the warship's lights glowed brighter against the darkness. People gathered throughout the colony, talking quietly, sharing food, and finally feeling like themselves again. When darkness fully arrived, the warship adjusted its position slightly, tilting its hull to shield the colony from solar winds passing through the area. It was a small gesture, one the residents might not have noticed if the technicians hadn't pointed it out, but when they learned what the ship was doing, the residents felt a deep warmth in their chests. The warship wasn't just hovering. It was protecting them. Inside the colony, the supervisor walked through the corridors one last time before resting. Everywhere he looked, he saw signs of life returning. People smiled. Machines hummed. Children laughed. Lights shone steadily instead of flickering. He paused near a window facing the sky. The warship floated above, lit softly by its thrusters. Its silhouette looked almost like a guardian spirit, strong and unshakable. He whispered to himself, "We really weren't forgotten." That single thought carried him through the quiet night. Far above, the warship remained on watch, calm, steady, and ready for whatever came next. The next sunrise felt different from all the others the colony had seen in recent days. It came gently, washing the dome in soft golden light, making the air feel warm and almost new. People woke up with more energy than they expected. After everything they had gone through, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. A quiet promise that the worst was finally behind them. Outside, the massive human warship still hovered above the colony, steady and calm, like a silent protector. Its lights shimmered faintly in the morning sky, reflecting off the dome. The residents stared at it with a mix of wonder and comfort. Even after a full day of repairs, the sight of the ship hadn't lost its impact. It still felt unbelievable that such a powerful vessel had come all the way across deep space just to help them. The colony slowly came alive with soft footsteps, sliding doors, and quiet conversations. Workers stepped out of their quarters, stretching and breathing in the fresh air that was now properly filtered and warm again. Some carried tools, ready to continue helping the human crew complete the final repairs. Others simply walked around the plaza, taking in the sense of security that filled every corner of the settlement. For many residents, this was the first morning in a long time where they didn't wake up with fear sitting in the back of their minds. Instead, they woke up with hope. Up close, the colony looked almost completely restored. The lights that had once flickered uncertainly were now steady. The power grid hummed smoothly. The water system worked without interruption. Communication screens showed healthy signal bars, glowing bright green. Even the gardens inside the dome looked livelier, their plants lifting with renewed energy after days of unstable environmental controls. The human crew from the warship moved through the colony with quiet purpose. Their voices were relaxed, no longer carrying the urgency of earlier days. The colony's residents followed them, asking questions, learning how to maintain the newly repaired systems, and offering small tokens of appreciation, a warm drink, a handmade charm, a snack from their kitchen. One of the human engineers walked through a hallway that now looked completely repaired. He placed his hand on a freshly installed panel and nodded in satisfaction. "You're good now. This place will hold strong for years." A local worker beside him breathed out with relief. "Feels strange. Everything working again. It means you're safe," the engineer said gently. "That's what matters." Down in the central plaza, a small gathering formed as people came together to talk. The mood was warm, almost festive, but not in a loud or chaotic way. It was calm and heartfelt. People shared stories about their experiences during the blackout, laughing lightly at small moments, growing quiet when remembering the fear. But the conversation always ended with gratitude for the rescue, gratitude for the repairs, gratitude simply for being alive and connected again. As the morning passed, the captain of the human warship finally stepped onto the plaza. The crowd noticed immediately. Residents straightened, some standing respectfully, others simply watching with quiet curiosity. The captain walked with steady confidence, not like someone who demanded attention, but someone who carried responsibility with grace. The colony's leader stepped forward, greeting the captain with a calm bow of the head. "We are grateful beyond words," he said. "You didn't just repair our systems. You brought back our hope." The captain gave a small, sincere smile. "We came because you needed us. That's what we do." The colony leader nodded. "Still, you crossed a great distance. You came through that strange rift in the sky. How did you even know we were? In trouble?" The captain looked up slightly, as if recalling that moment. "Weeks ago, we detected a faint signal, almost lost in static. We weren't even sure it came from your region at first, but we kept tracking it. When your communication went completely silent, we knew something was very wrong." The residents listened quietly, absorbing every word. "So we set course here," the captain continued. "The jump was risky, but we couldn't ignore your signal. No colony should ever feel abandoned." The leader's eyes softened. "You arrived right when we needed you most. That's what matters," the captain said simply. "The timing." Those simple words touched everyone standing there. It felt like hearing a promise, rather than just a statement of fact. As the conversation ended, the captain walked with the colony leader through various sections of the settlement. They looked at restored power lines, reinforced walls, stable, environmental controls, and the fully repaired communication center. Each place carried signs of teamwork, human hands and resident hands working together, fixing what had once seemed impossible. Near midday, the final tests began. Lights were cycled on and off. Ventilation systems were run at full power. Emergency backups were triggered. Sensors scanned every inch of the dome. Each test came back with a green signal. By afternoon, it was official. Colony was fully stable again. The human engineers began packing up their equipment, loading tools back into their cases. Medical specialists finished the last supply deliveries. Technicians completed their final checks. Residents gathered around them, watching with mixed emotions. They were grateful for the help, relieved to be safe, but a little sad to see the rescue crew preparing to leave. When everything was ready, the captain addressed the colony one last time. The residents gathered in the plaza, forming a circle around the human crew. The warm afternoon light made the moment feel peaceful. "You are no longer in danger," the captain said. "Your systems are restored, your communication is stable, and your colony can stand strong again. We are proud of you, proud of how you kept going, even when everything seemed dark." People listened silently, their expressions soft. The captain continued, "We want you to know one thing clearly. You are never forgotten. Even when your message was faint, even when we almost lost the signal, we heard you. Humanity heard you." A quiet but emotional murmur moved through the crowd. The captain smiled gently. "And if you ever need help again, we'll come, no matter the distance, no matter how deep the void is." The colony leader stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. "We will never forget what you did for us. We thought help would never come, but you appeared when we needed you most, like light breaking through darkness." The captain bowed slightly. "Take care of each other. That's what keeps a colony alive." With that, the human crew began walking toward their shuttle. Residents waved, some calling out thank yous, others simply standing with their hands over their hearts. A child ran forward and handed one of the crew members a small stone carved with symbols from the colony's culture. The crew member accepted it with warm gratitude. Before boarding, the shuttle rose slowly, its engines glowing softly. It lifted into the air, hovered for a moment, and shot upward toward the warship. Minutes later, the warship began its own departure sequence. Light spread across its hull as its engines powered up, casting a serene glow across the colony. The residents watched silently, not wanting to miss a single moment. The warship tilted slightly, angling toward the open sky. Then, with a deep, resonant it surged forward. Space around it shimmered as it activated its jump drive. A bright ripple of light expanded outward, gentle but powerful. For a second, it looked like a star blooming in the sky. Then the warship shot into the void and disappeared. The sky returned to normal. The colony remained quiet for a few moments more, as if holding on to the presence of the warship just a little longer. Eventually, people began moving again. Smiles spread. Conversations started. The plaza filled with life. The supervisor stood alone for a moment, staring at the place where the ship had vanished. He felt something deep settle in his chest: gratitude, relief, and a renewed sense of responsibility. He knew they would face challenges again someday, but now they knew something stronger than fear. They would never face them alone. As he walked back into the colony, he looked around. Children played again near the gardens. Workers examined the new panels with bright curiosity. Families talked about the future with confidence. The colony wasn't just repaired, that it was reborn, that it felt stronger than before, not just because of the new systems, but because of what they had learned about themselves and about the people who came to save them. They had learned that even in the deepest silence, even in the darkest space, help could come from the most unexpected place. And when it arrived with the unmistakable strength of humanity.